So this would be a senior tutorial about forms. We are going to look at the form design. We have been looking at the form elements, input types, input attributes, and other ways. We are going to look at a few of them here, but this tutorial is majorly going to focus on designing forms, and the forms we are trying to design are for mobile responsive, or they are responsive in that you could design this form and be guaranteed that it is going to work on any of the platform, whether you are applying it to a mobile phone, or you are simply going to use a tablet. Whatever device you are going to use, it will be able to display properly. Just like we did with responsive images, we are going to look at tables later. Watch out for the upcoming tutorials on tables, beginning with introductions, and then we look at how you can design a table. So here we are going to simply begin with an element called text area. So that we are going to begin with. Then from text area we look at how you can design a search bar. In most cases you wouldn't need to design it, but then in case you need to design it, because if you realize in most cases it is just left as it is, just an input text, and then it is left as it is. So we could just we are not designing these forms right now for upload. The design would be the same. That is why I've removed the action. We are not looking at those things concerning method. We did that in the preliminary tutorials. We were not dealing with PHP, we were dealing with HTML and CSS. So you could simply type in text area, and then you can fill up all these, maybe message. The ID could be important in case you could, because in most cases there are not more than one text area on a form. So you could simply select it using the word text area, or the element name text area, and you would still have it. You could also have something like this. I could put a message here, one that is not very important, but I can leave it here. So by default these are the columns. You could enlarge it if you want, but apart from that we would expect only this. So this is the normal format of a text area. We could begin, like I said, we don't need to can link our style sheet here. If this is your first time to watch this tutorial, in most of the tutorials you won't find this kind of linking. Why? Because the CSS file and the HTML file or the PHP file is usually in the same folder, but in my case I put them in different folders because that is what I think that you need to use, such that you can separate your information properly. So with that linking we could come here and say text area, because it is usually one on the form. We can say text area border. By default it has a border, but we can say border none. We don't want any border there. Then we can begin by creating our own borders. We can say maybe border bottom. It depends on how you would want to design it. There are a few things you are going to look at. Maybe for the first time I could say border bottom 3 pixels, I want it solid. I want to give it a color purple. And then I would want another border at the left hand side, and then a size of say 3 pixels still, also solid. The color I can use maybe sea green. When we go back, you can choose to use a live server. If you have not installed that extension, you will have to keep on refreshing just like I am doing now, but it is important that you install a live server. You can see how this looks like now. These are the borders we were creating. Then we could even come here and just increase its size 50. The column, you could look at how big that is. You could increase its height here. I told you with text area you do not need to can make this 15. It is not good to use the width and height properties because they do not respond properly to very many different screen sizes. So always use columns and rows. That way you are guaranteed that if you were to make your form very responsive, then it was going to pick this information properly. So we could have a text area of that size. Then we can say just create some nice curvature border radius of around 8 pixels. In case you are wondering, you could also watch another tutorial about text, especially dealing with border radius. Then we could do this, would create some nice curvatures on this our page. Then we could do on the text area rather, we can remove any outlines, say outline none. We don't want any outlines, just like we removed the borders by default and set ours. We could create a padding. This is not compulsory, but you include it in such that the text you are going to put in has got some boundaries. So we are saying top bottom should leave a space of 15 pixels, left to right is 45 pixels. Why? Because we've already made our stuff big enough. Now you could see the curvatures coming up here. You can see our image also, rather message pushing in a little bit. So even if you started typing, there is a compulsory limit you reach at, not at the exact bottom. You will not always design the text area separate from other input types because it usually does not move around. Now that we have used the paddings, then we apply border box or box sizing property. This would help you to maintain the exact width you have created already. We have another one here we call resize. I can say none. What this does, you can see here right now, we could hold here and resize this. This is not what you want. So when you say resize none, it will remove this property. So this will not be moving, it will be static to the size you have set. So this is probably all you would want. It is a white background, so you might we could just come here slightly and say maybe a body. We could if we said maybe background color, we can take say something like that. So when we do that, so now you can see we could even increase our pixels if just for the purposes of designing. Otherwise this size would be enough, visible enough, but to increase my pixels such that you see how beautiful it would look like. So that is how it is. You could change, by the way, from solid. I could use maybe offset. In this one here I can call it offset, and this is going to change how this will look like. Now it looks as if it is some sort of box. If we had applied it all over, then we would create that. But that is not all. You can choose to say that there are certain things that need to happen in case you focus on the text area. We can maybe say that the background color should be maybe sea green. Then we could say that the color of the words we are going to type in there maybe be white smoke. We could also choose, if it is important, we could enlarge the size by simply setting the font size. Using the font size also, you can enlarge the size of this text area. You could set it, let's say 20 pixels. So when we refresh and focusing on is either by clicking in, highlighting it, so you are focusing, we would see this kind of thing. You can see now our text is turning into we could change this a bit to such that it keeps on being visible, orange red. So when it is orange red and we do like this, you will see our boundaries from the left and the bottom. When you start typing whatever you type, then this is the same thing you can achieve. The next thing we can look at is the search bar. In the first tutorials we even looked at how to make our search but you would need other parameters or other languages to do that, to enhance its capabilities. Right now we are just going to look at how to design it, and there are search bars that not every search bar must have an icon, but I know out of curiosity you would want to have a search bar with an icon. So if we are going to do that, how then do they do it? That's what we are going to look at, such that in case you ever want an icon there, you could use a direct link of an icon, but that is also not very good for a search bar. You could just download an icon image with enough size, and then you are able to place it there. So on our form here, we could come here, we say BR, we could say HR, okay, we could say form, we have here our input. We could set it to text or we could set it to search. It is okay. Since we are just designing, we can set it to text. Of course it has a name, that is search. Then it has, we can use a placeholder. I told you a placeholder defines more than just the input. In case it had a label, for example, the placeholder defines what the input is about more than the label itself. So but here we can just say search. At a later stage I will make another tutorial that can show you more in-depth design of any input you would want, be it a password input, be it so we could include in other transitions, several other things. So we could then come here. If we refresh our page, that is what we see by default. That is generally what you will be able to see. That is a search, but we need to work on it. So we could now come here and say that can put it here, designing an animated search bar. Okay, so you can say input. By using this, you remember when we had attribute selectors, this is the same way this is what we are applying. Input selectors, rather attribute selectors, we could say input type equals text. Then we can begin with this is 10%. When we begin with percentages, we get to know this is going to be responsive, so it will always occupy 10% of the width. Whatever viewport is, it will occupy 10%. Border is none, we also don't want a border there. You can say border bottom. Border bottom, you could say 3 pixels solid, purple. We can say border radius about 8 pixels. Say we have looked at all these, that is why I'm not going back to show you how they look like. I can say that the font size of whatever is there is 20 pixels. You could leave it at 18 or default of between 16 and 14, and rather 14 and 16. You don't want an outline, you would want to create your own in case, because by default they have got a small outlining or border. You could choose to say that the padding here, okay, padding is 15 pixels top bottom, 45 pixels left to right. We are leaving space. Let me show you this one. So when I refresh, this is how far we've gone. So I am leaving this space here, and we are going to see how to occupy it. So I can go ahead and say that background image, okay, can use it for as it is, URL. I can pick this image. I'm under CSS, I use double dots. You can check out the tutorial of how to link web pages. I talk about this. You can even check out the first tutorials, a small introduction about HTML. I talk about how to use the double dots, single dots, what all these ones mean. I can go to images, and I had created one called search. So now when we refresh our page, this is where it is. You can see there are many, and if you haven't watched a tutorial called the images or styling images, please look for it. It's a nice one. It talks about the properties we are going to apply. You can say background dash repeat, then we say no repeat. By default, if it is a small image against the area you are going to distribute it at, it will always repeat itself. So you can say no repeat. Now this is what we have, but we can improve it. We can improve it a little bit. We can say that background position, you want it to cover both X and Y positions, 10 pixels top bottom. Let me show you before I add on anything where that one will take it. You can see where it is now. Then 8 pixels left to right. So we are positioning it exactly at that place. Then we could say you can add a small transition to animate it. Transition, I'm sure you will meet it somewhere if you haven't met it anywhere. We are going to try to transition or transform or animate the width, That is the property we are going to animate. You could animate many. You can check out the tutorial about units under borders, units. You can check out the tutorial called units, and then you look for time. You will see these transitions we have, or else we shall in future also look out for tutorials that will be coming up under animations. So we can say it should take 1 second. The type we want is now, these are the types, so we can just pick this. Then to make sure, I can just refresh. So for now, this is all we could do. Currently there is nothing. You could type in, and the advantage of a placeholder is that when you start typing, the word will move away by itself. You could walk inside here, change the color, all those things you could work on them. Maybe the reason we leave it as black is because black would be a universal. Anybody has got almost no problems with black, but we can put in that type of color. If you play around with the top bottom, you can push it either this side or this side, or you could simply reduce this, play around with this maybe to 40, such that you push it a little bit to the left. So you could work on the text here also. You could call this maybe 6. You could call this 4. And we refresh, we have it at such a position. If you want, you can push it further down, 12, and then you will have something like this. So you play around with these figures, or else you can give each side its own element. So these are not particular. You could adjust them in any way you want. So, but for the transition to work, we need to set a certain property. Say using a pseudo class, you could say that input, of which input we are using attribute selectors. Then we say type equals text, whatever type is text, and it is focus tone. Focus. To defocus, you could highlight or click in it. That's the major. Width should now be 80%. But when you click in it, the width could be 80%. You can play around with this, no problem. We could also change them from here, by the way. Could leave it as it is here. Then we say when you click in, the color should be something like this. That one we would have no problem. You can even change the background on the very first day, but we can leave it at that. There are many things. You choose what suits you. So you can see now it is covering 80%. I can type in that one is so much into search. I just need to come here and increase the padding back to 45. Then it can start slightly somewhere there. Okay, so you would just put an element here, say of go, or by default pressing enter, the browser would know that this is what you would want to search. There are other parameters to make this work best. Say you could set it that it searches through these indices and then give out the information. Right now we are talking about how you would design these forms or these input types, and then you would be able to come up, or in case you would want, we shall have time also create another tutorial and we see how these can function properly. We could come here and work on another thing, another input. I could add it here. I can just say BR. Okay, BR. I can just add it in here instead of creating another form. And I say label. Now assuming it was a proper form, it is okay. Can just say maybe dot form dash menu. You could say form, and then we say label. You can say label is country. Here it's country, or we can say select country. We can put it under it, but let it be on the same line. Then we can use the select element and fill in this at the same time. We can say country. Can just add to make sure it won't confuse anything. In case you are till, I can just say o-country, meaning country of origin. Then you've got to set the options of the countries that you expect this person to be coming from. You could maybe say option the value in case somebody selected this. This would be America, then this is America. Can I write this one now? We are going to do a small sample. Could remove this and say this is Kenya, and this is maybe Tanzania, then this could be Uganda. Try to change this to Uganda. This is Tanzania. This is Kenya. So when we come back, by default this is what we shall have. Okay, with all our parameters there. I've looked at that in introductions, but then we could come here and say selected, such that whatever we see, maybe because I am from Uganda, then Uganda is the one that is supposed to be selected by default. So we could then choose to see how we can design this. I could come here and say add a background color. That is okay. We could come straight away and say select, picking that element. What width should it cover? Maybe it can cover width of 30%. We are just making it huge for purposes of us studying. Okay, otherwise there would be no need of you having all this thing. You can even set it to say 20%, just for purposes of you viewing this. Otherwise the default one is always okay, because it will always enlarge itself to cater for the longest of the elements. serif. In Firefox, this function would set Uganda to be selected by default. So here we would be able to see Uganda by default. We saw that in the tutorials, that the introduction to forms. We could then say border none. We can add a border bottom. I'm trying to use the same parameters in the interest of time, otherwise we would come up with other things. So you take your time, and I know you might not like the same colors that I am using, so it is up to you to look for any other color that you might find interesting to you. Border radius of 8 pixels. Then I could just add a small padding inside, top, bottom. I'm using these two parameters in case you ever want to increase one side. When I come, this is what we have now. Okay. We could also say maybe increase the font size a little bit, to say 15 pixels. If you use the padding, be always out on the watch that if at time I use padding, then I need to set the box sizing property. When we refresh now, this is what we have. You can see there is some enlargement. So that is our input that we have looked at. But we can also say, for example, that dot form dash menu, which was our class, select. It may be sure that that is the class form dash menu. We could say color to be maybe teal. Okay, so we change from black to teal. That is what you would see. Every time I come here, these would change their color to teal every time they are there. Otherwise, you could target directly the options and give them a color or something like that. Form dash menu, select maybe option. Could say color, let's say green. Setting the, if you wanted, you could do it directly inside here, which is not very sweet, because you wouldn't want to do inline the styling. So you could design your form input or a menu like that, such that it looks different. In most cases, you will just find them that that there is nothing much, because somebody is just interested in making sure that that you just select. The most important thing is the other side we did in HTML, but this would also look nice, just like how this is. To complete of knowing what we had searched at, we had talked about it. You could come here in the form. Maybe if it is your first time, I encourage you to look out for an introduction tutorial about introduction to forms. You could come here and say autocomplete, and then you turn it on, such that if for the selections you would have made later, they could be found out just like that. So that is something that I believe would be sweet, one that you would want to understand how it is done, and it is as simple as that, because then you are free. Let me see, I had an area crash on Firefox. Okay, an area crash on Firefox. That is why some of the elements we are having here are not able to give us what we really want. So that is okay. We could use our Live server in that way. Okay. And now you can see now, because Uganda is by default, we said selected. That way we would then have our options, rather our Uganda selected. You could use it as one that will help you to be patriotic a little bit. Okay, be patriotic a little bit. So that is it. You can look at another option for, you can look at one more for how to design buttons, for example. And now we have reset, we have submit, we have other button types. If you would just say button, you would look at most of the types that you would then work with. You can just come here and say BR, could say HR here. Then we can go ahead and say form. And we see how to look at to work on these buttons. So by default, you can even put this in a class. You can say .f buttons to mean form buttons, because I like doing this the way you are going to do it, because you would put it in a class such that you can work on it individually or independent of any other form that you would probably later add on to your page. So by default, when you just say input and you just say maybe button, okay, the type being button, you can say value to be maybe send, and then we would have a button there for sending. It could have just been a button alone without using input, it would still pick it. We could change this type to reset, and then we say reset, maybe capital letters, no problem. Could change this to submit, and then we change this also to value as submit. So we have our buttons like this. This is how they are, and Remember, you could introduce something else in here and say title, submit, title, click to submit. So when we hover over here, now you can see it has information. Click to submit. So we could do the same thing here and say title, you can say click to send, then we can change this to reset. So that title attribute is very important because it can tell somebody what this button or anything else. You could even do it on this by just saying title, what this would mean. There are those the browser is able to read, like this. We didn't set a title, but it is able to read that is our title. So if those are the normal buttons, how then can we change how they look like? That is what we are going to look at. So I can come and say here, I'm going to look at 3 different designs. You pick your choice. You are going to start with an elementary one. We can say F buttons, say designing from buttons. So you can say F buttons, which is the parent class. What should you pick? You should pick an input of type according to button. Pick an input of type according to button, like this. What should you do to its background color? Make it teal, just a simple one. Color of the word, make it white, smoke. Would have stayed as simple as possible. Border dash radius. You could say maybe text dash align center. Okay. Then you could maybe increase its font size. Only the font size, not any other parameters. 20 pixels. More readable. We can just force its width to be just maybe, let's call it 15%, for example. Okay. So when we come back, this is the button we have. So let us advance a little bit. The next button type is reset. So we can pick all these. Okay. Reset a little bit to 10. Can pick all these, paste here, change this to reset. Need to be sure that that is the button we are dealing with. Reset, correct spelling. We can just apply, for example, display in case it was going to sit with others in line block. We could then have our Textarea in center. We could apply a border here. You could say border of 2 pixels. Okay, solid. I've told you you can use these colors and you don't have to worry, they can be generated, especially with this text editor. Maybe that is the color you have liked. If I wanted to know, I would come here and then use the RGB of the same color and be able to select it differently. So that is okay. It looks cool and a bit scary, but nothing much. You can say padding 8 pixels top bottom, 8 pixels left to right. Then we could say box sizing, border box, because we were trying to make sure we contain that. We could that is okay. We can even make sure that the cursor pointer, the cursor should turn to be a pointer, sort of a little finger. We could say, but the most important thing comes here on setting the background. That is where I would want to take you. Background, we can say linear gradient. There are many ways you can use linear gradient. I prefer saying to bottom. You can use degrees. Another thing is that you can use more than one color, and you can use more than 2 colors. It depends on how you would want to make. So I'm saying make these 2 colors, they should blend towards the bottom. You could say to up, to rather to top, to left, to right, or you could use degrees, which there is another tutorial coming up about gradients. So check it out in case we shall have created it. Then you can search for it, gradients. Then we shall discuss more about linear gradient, the difference between this and the radial gradient. When you go back, this is by the how our button now looks like. Okay, slightly better than this. More design. Could increase even its font size, or you can change the font type, 25. Maybe font family here, I can say Tahoma, and it is what I want first here. Could use an online font family. We have covered that under text. This is what we have now. Could increase its font weight. There are many. I am just showing you, or laminating your mind that many things are possible. You could add a box shadow here. So this is covered under text. Check out text effects. There is a tutorial of text effects. You can check out this box shadow both on images, even under images we cover it. Styling images part 1 and part 2. How to revise box shadow, you can begin either with the color or the parameters. So now today we are beginning with the color. In most cases we begin with the parameters, and then we end with the color. Top, bottom 0, top 0, right 0, bottom is 10 pixels, left is also 0. Okay, so I could even remove this, and this would mean the same thing. Top, left, right, and then bottom. So when I come back, there is a small shadow there. You can change the color. For you to be able to look at it. We have a gray thing there. Can maybe make it tend to borrow a little bit, or we could even increase it. Maybe if we have gray, we can pick a color that we think is going to be visible. So here you play around with what you want. I could even increase this and say maybe just a small bit of 2 pixels, then the brush should be 5 pixels. You could also set it like that, and this is what I would have. There is a shadow there of that magnitude. Otherwise, if you increase the number of pixels, you would be able to get more, maybe not what you actually had anticipated. You can see it there. I just want to show you that it is there. All you have to do is to play around with these numbers intelligently, and then the background color you would have set. Let us look at the third one. Another way you would want to design this, it was type submit. We could copy these. I would see what we don't want or what we can improve on. This was submit. Could carry all these. Could increase my padding here to 12 pixels. This one to 28. We are going to create something slightly huge. We could even set just the background in case we run on a website, or rather web browser that doesn't work with linear gradient, if it exists, that is. So we have our box shadow here. We could create also the text shadow. So this under text, you can check it out. The color we are saying 591717. I told you, even if you didn't know these things, you can change these colors, these numbers, and create your own color. As long as you have 6 digits, you will have created your own color, and nobody will be angry at you. Can change these colors slightly a bit. Can say such that you create something different. 652, 6 for example, 99. I also do not know what color that is, but I know it exists. As long as I create my 6 numbers, I will have a certain color. So for the start, you can work it out like that. We are just trying to increase the understanding of this. We could do many other things we can add on. Could, for example, work on the font, but that is okay. Let us look at what we are creating. See, show better than this, but we can apply small transition to make it look like as if it is floating. Can pick this such that we don't type it again. The hover effect or the focus effect. You can say dot the whole of this, and then we say on hover. We can put a comma. Then we can also say when you focus, that is, say at the time of clicking, what should happen. Remember, we can set a transition. We want to work with the width, play around with the width a bit. Can say width 1 second, it should take 1 second, is in and out. Then we could come here, so this is where we shall put the property now. The width should expand slightly. Since it was 15% here, we can take it, okay, let us, okay, 25%, okay, 20% for you to see. We could do many other things. Remove, if it was a link, for example, we could remove text decorations. We could remove text decorations for a link. I am applying these here such that you are able to see them. None. Okay. If there are any other text decorations also, they would be rendered to none. We could change the color a little bit to EEE FFB5. I also have that color. Then if we are working around with the color, we can change the background to match the color. Say 59 FFDC, 6 characters for a mixture. So now when I hover over, you see the dance, that you can see it is taking away our business. You can just leave this one out. Okay, you can leave that one out, or design a different linear now altogether, the different colors. You can just play around with the width. Click submit because of our title function, or our title attribute rather. So you could do much more to this thing with these transitions. You could transition the background color changing. If I brought this one here, can pick this, okay, then come down here, paste it, then I say we are also going to translate the background. We could do set other different parameters. We could maybe say that is width. We can transition dash property, then we have transition dash duration. You could say the background maybe 2 seconds, comma the width. We could also maybe say 1 second, the duration of how long it would take to see this coming up. So you can change the color here slightly, a little light, then we can come to this color also, and maybe mix it with something like this. Okay, shall see how that one will come up. So when we hover on 2 seconds, you can see 2 seconds seems a small time. Maybe for you to agree with me, let us take it to 5, take this to 5, then you see the difference coming up slowly like this. That is the difference because of the transition duration we have set, and it will take the same time to do that. So those are buttons, and how you would design buttons. For example, I believe that is something quite interesting that one would be happy to understand. We could now okay, so that would be